Hello, my students. Let me ask you something real. How many times have you stopped yourself from speaking English just because you were afraid of making a mistake? You knew the words, you had the idea, but that tiny voice in your head whispered, "What if I say it wrong?" That voice has stopped more dreams than failure ever did. But today, I want you to silence that voice, because in this episode, I'm going to show you something powerful, that your mistakes are not your enemies. They are your greatest teachers. The people who learn the fastest, speak the best, and grow the most are not the ones who avoid mistakes. They're the ones who use them. So I want you to listen carefully and stay with me till the very end, because by the end of this episode, you'll never look at mistakes the same way again. You'll see that every wrong word, every failure, every moment of fear is secretly shaping you into something stronger. So sit back, relax, and open your mind, because this lesson might change the way you learn and maybe even the way you live. Welcome to Flexlish English, where we don't just learn English, we learn how to grow through it. Part 1. The Prison of Perfection. Everyone wants to get things right. We all want to speak perfectly, act perfectly, live perfectly. But the truth is, perfection is a trap. It keeps you stuck. It keeps you small. And for many people, it's the reason they never grow. Let's be honest. You've probably stopped yourself from doing something because you were afraid of messing it up. Maybe you wanted to speak English with someone but thought, "What if I make mistakes?" Maybe you had an idea but didn't share it because you were scared people might laugh. Maybe you dreamed of starting something new, a project, a channel, a business. But fear whispered, "You're not ready yet." That voice, the voice of fear, is the real reason most people never reach their potential, because it doesn't scream, it whispers. It makes you wait for the perfect moment, the perfect time, the perfect skill, the perfect confidence. But that moment never comes. Perfection is the enemy of progress. You see, mistakes are not the opposite of success. They are part of it. Every person you admire, every fluent speaker, every entrepreneur, every artist has failed more times than you can imagine. The difference is, they didn't run from their mistakes. They learned from them. The fear of mistakes is a cage built by your own thoughts. And the door? It's open. But you'll never walk out unless you realize one thing. Mistakes are not proof that you're weak. They're proof that you're learning. Think about when you were a child learning to walk. You fell hundreds of times. You didn't cry and say, "I'll never walk again." You stood up, tried again, and kept going until one day you walked. That's what growth looks like: falling, learning, rising. But somewhere along the way, society made us believe that mistakes are shameful, that failing means we're not good enough. Schools teach us to avoid errors instead of learning from them. Jobs reward perfection instead of progress. And little by little, we start believing that making a mistake means something's wrong with us. That's where fear begins. And it grows quietly. Fear of mistakes doesn't just hold you back from success. It steals your freedom. It stops you from trying, from exploring, from creating. It makes you overthink every word, every action. You become so busy avoiding errors that you forget to live. But here's a secret. The people who grow the fastest are not the ones who avoid mistakes. They're the ones who collect them. They experiment, they fall, they fail, but each time they learn something new. Every mistake carries a message. Every failure hides a lesson. If you're brave enough to face it, to ask, what can I learn from this? Your mistakes become your greatest teachers. And yes, it hurts sometimes. Mistakes can make you feel embarrassed, disappointed, frustrated. But pain is not the enemy. It's a signal. It tells you that something inside you is changing, that you're growing, that you're stepping outside your comfort zone. In fact, if you're not making mistakes, it probably means you're not learning anything new. It means you're staying safe, comfortable, stuck. Comfort is nice, but it never leads to growth. So the next time you hesitate to try because you're scared of failing, remember this: the pain of regret is far worse than the pain of mistakes. Regret is heavy. It lasts for years. Mistakes are temporary. They pass and they teach. Every mistake you make brings you closer to mastery. Every error you face builds confidence. Every failure shapes wisdom. The people who seem fearless are not people who never fail. They're people who learned that failing is normal, that it's just feedback, not final. That's why your fear of mistakes is actually your greatest opportunity, because it shows you where you need to grow. The things you fear the most often hold the lessons you need the most. If you're afraid of speaking, it means your growth is in communication. If you're afraid of trying, it means your growth is in courage. If you're afraid of failing, it means your growth is in resilience. So don't run from fear. Use it as a compass. Let it point you toward the areas that will make you stronger. And remember, the people who laugh at your mistakes today are often the same ones who'll admire your success tomorrow. So my question to you is this: what would you do if you stopped caring about getting everything right? How much would you grow if you saw every mistake as a lesson instead of a failure? Because that mindset changes everything. Part 2. The illusion of failure. When people say they're afraid of making mistakes, what they're really afraid of is failure. They imagine failure as something dark, something final, something that says, you're not good enough. But that's just an illusion, because failure isn't an ending. It's feedback. It's the world showing you what doesn't work, so you can find what does. Think about every invention, every masterpiece, every success story in history. Behind each one, there are dozens, sometimes hundreds, of failed attempts. Thomas Edison once said, "I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work." That's the mindset of a learner. But most people don't think like that anymore. We've been conditioned to fear being wrong in school, in work, in relationships, even in learning languages. We've been taught to hide our mistakes instead of using them. But hiding your mistakes hides your growth. Let's take language learning as an example, something every Flexlish English student knows well. You can read, memorize, and study grammar for years. But if you never speak, if you never make mistakes, your English will never come alive. You'll know about the language, but you'll never live it. Because fluency doesn't come from perfection. It comes from practice, errors, and adjustments. Every time you make a mistake in English, your brain gets feedback. It learns faster. It remembers longer. It builds stronger connections. In fact, neuroscientists have discovered something fascinating. The brain grows more when you make a mistake than when you get something right, because your mind becomes alert. It tries to understand, it adjusts. That's how real learning happens, through mistakes, not through avoidance. But here's what happens to most people. They're so afraid of getting it wrong that they don't even try. They wait for the right moment, the perfect sentence, the safe situation. And in that waiting, they lose time. Time they could have spent growing. The truth is, you can't think your way into confidence. You can only act your way into it. And the only way to act is to start, fail, learn, and try again. When you look at successful people, it's easy to think they got lucky, that they're naturally confident or talented. But what you don't see are the moments behind the scenes, the rejections, the wrong turns, the embarrassing mistakes that nobody talks about. They didn't get there in spite of their mistakes. They got there because of them. Let's talk about fear for a second. Fear of mistakes often shows up as overthinking. You start analyzing everything, what to say, how to act, how to avoid looking stupid. But overthinking doesn't protect you. It paralyzes you. It makes you a prisoner of your own mind. The truth is, no one is judging you as much as you think. Everyone is too busy worrying about their own fears, their own image, their own imperfections. We think people notice every little mistake. They don't. They notice your energy, your presence, your effort. So stop holding yourself back because of imaginary eyes that aren't even watching. Here's something powerful to remember. Mistakes are just data. They tell you what didn't work so you can improve what will. If you can detach your emotions from your errors, you'll start to see them as tools, not threats. And that's when life changes. When you stop asking, "What if I fail?" and start asking, "What will I learn?" The most successful learners, speakers, and creators in the world share one habit. They fail publicly. They don't wait until they're perfect. They try things. They make mistakes in front of people. They learn faster because they're not hiding. It takes courage to fail publicly, yes, but courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward despite the fear. And here's something else most people miss. Failure is temporary, but fear can last forever, if you let it. The only way to make fear smaller is to face it. Because once you do the thing you're scared of, you realize it's not as bad as you imagined. Most of the fear existed only in your mind, and the more you face it, the weaker it becomes. Like a shadow, fear disappears the moment you walk toward the light. So the next time you make a mistake, don't say, "I failed." Say, "I learned something new today." Because you did. Maybe you learned what not to do. Maybe you learned how to handle pressure. Maybe you learned how strong you actually are. Every mistake teaches you something valuable, if you're humble enough to listen. And maybe the most powerful lesson of all is this: you don't have to be perfect to be proud of yourself. Progress itself is a victory. So stop waiting to get it right. Start getting it real. Speak with mistakes. Work with uncertainty. Move with courage. Because perfection doesn't create greatness. Persistence does. And persistence only comes when you're willing to fall and stand again, over and over, until you grow. So I want you to think about this. What's one thing you've been avoiding because you're scared of making a mistake? What if you tried it and discovered that your mistake wasn't the end, but the beginning? Because sometimes failure is just success in progress. Part 3. The lesson inside every mistake. Every mistake carries a message, but most people never hear it because they're too busy running from it. They're afraid of the discomfort, the embarrassment, the sting of being wrong. But if you can pause for just a moment, if you can breathe through the discomfort and look at the mistake closely, you'll see something powerful hiding inside. A mistake is never just a failure, it's a mirror. It shows you where you are, what you don't know yet, and who you can become next. Think of your mistakes like personal feedback from life. Every time you make one, the world is saying, here's where you can grow. But instead of listening, we often choose to defend ourselves, to blame others, or to feel ashamed. We forget that growth doesn't come from being right. It comes from being real. Let's imagine something simple. You're speaking English and you use the wrong word. You feel embarrassed. You think, oh no, I made a mistake. But pause for a second. What just happened? You learned. You got instant feedback. You discovered a new way to say something. You connected one more piece of knowledge in your brain. That's not failure. That's progress in action. Mistakes are like your private teachers, always ready to help you improve if you're humble enough to listen. But here's the problem. Society has made us allergic to being wrong. We treat mistakes like proof of weakness, when in reality, they're proof of effort. The only people who never make mistakes are the ones who never try. And if you never try, you never grow. You see, mistakes are not the end of learning. They are the learning. Every skill you've ever mastered came from 1,000 small failures first. You learned to walk by falling. You learned to speak by mispronouncing words. You learned to write by scribbling nonsense before forming sentences. But as adults, we forget that learning is messy. We expect perfection, and when we don't meet that expectation, we give up too early. But growth is not clean or easy. It's full of scratches, confusion, and retrees. And that's okay, because that's what real development looks like. The truth is, mistakes don't define you. How you respond to them does. When something goes wrong, you have two choices. You can see it as a reason to quit or as a reason to get better. The people who achieve greatness aren't smarter than others. They're simply better at learning from their failures. They analyze them. They ask, what went wrong? What can I change? What can I improve next time? That's what transforms failure into feedback. Let's look at an example. Imagine two students. Both give a presentation in English. Both make mistakes. The first student says, I'm terrible at this. I'll never speak well. The second says, okay, I said that word wrong. Next time, I'll practice that sentence again. Who will improve faster? Of course, the second one, because she saw the mistake as information, not humiliation. That's the secret difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. A fixed mindset says, if I make mistakes, I'm not good enough. A growth mindset says, if I make mistakes, I'm learning something new. The first creates fear. The second creates freedom. Once you start viewing mistakes as feedback, fear begins to disappear. Because suddenly you realize there's nothing to lose, only lessons to gain. And that shift in thinking changes everything. You stop being afraid to try. You stop worrying about what people think. You start focusing on what really matters, your progress. And here's something important. The more mistakes you make, the faster you grow. Every mistake is like a map. It shows you the way forward. When something doesn't work, you eliminate one wrong path and get closer to the right one. That's how scientists discover. That's how artists improve. That's how learners master any skill. Mistakes make your learning personal. They help you build your own version of success, not someone else's. And when you start learning from them, you build something even more valuable than skill. You build resilience. Resilience means you can fall and rise again without losing faith in yourself. Because once you've learned to bounce back from your own mistakes, you become unstoppable. No criticism can break you. No failure can define you, because you've already learned the most powerful truth. Mistakes are not enemies. They're allies. They remind you that you're trying, that you're alive, that you're still in the game. So the next time something goes wrong, instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" try asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" That small shift turns pain into purpose. And remember, the best lessons in life rarely come wrapped in comfort. They come wrapped in challenges, confusion, and failure. But once you open them, you find growth, wisdom, and strength inside. The question is, are you brave enough to open those lessons? Are you willing to see your mistakes not as something to hide, but as something to learn from? Because if you are, there's no limit to how much you can grow. Part 4. Turning fear into fuel. Let's talk about fear, not the loud kind, the quiet one, the fear that lives deep inside your mind, the one that whispers, "What if I fail again?" That fear can be invisible, but powerful. It's the reason many people never start, never speak, never share, never grow. But here's something most people never realize. Fear isn't always your enemy. In fact, fear can be your teacher. If you stop running from it, every time you feel afraid, it's your brain's way of saying, "You're stepping into something new." It's a sign of growth, not danger. Fear appears when you're about to expand, when you're about to become more than you were yesterday. You see, your comfort zone feels safe, but it's also small. Inside it, there are no mistakes, but there's also no growth. When you live inside that bubble of safety, you protect yourself from failure, but you also protect yourself from success. Because success and mistakes are born in the same place, outside your comfort zone. Think about every great thing you've ever done, every achievement, every breakthrough, every proud moment. It all started with fear. You were scared, you were uncertain, but you did it anyway. And that's where courage is born, not in the absence of fear, but in walking through it. Courage isn't about feeling brave all the time. It's about feeling fear and choosing to move forward anyway. So the next time you feel afraid to make a mistake, remember this. That fear means you're alive, you're learning, you're growing. It's not a stop sign. It's a signal that you're on the right path. Here's the truth. Fear can't be eliminated, but it can be transformed. And the way you transform fear is through action. Action kills fear faster than anything else. You can't think your way out of fear. You have to act your way through it. When you take action, even a small step, something magical happens. Your brain stops imagining what could go wrong and starts focusing on what's actually happening. That's when fear loses its power. Let's take an example. You want to speak English with someone new, But fear says, you'll make mistakes. You'll sound bad. You overthink. You hesitate. But then one day, you just do it. You speak. You make mistakes. Yes. But you realize something surprising. The world didn't end. No one laughed. And suddenly, your fear becomes smaller. That's how courage grows. One small, brave moment at a time. Here's a simple truth that changes lives. Fear grows in silence. It shrinks in action. When you stay quiet, fear gets louder. When you move forward, fear gets weaker. That's why every mistake you make in action is 10 times more valuable than a perfect plan you never try. Every time you take a risk, your confidence grows. Not because everything went perfectly, but because you survived it. You faced the thing you were scared of, and you realized, I can handle this. That realization changes everything. Over time, you start trusting yourself. You stop needing to be perfect before starting. You stop waiting for confidence because you know confidence doesn't come before action. It comes after. That's the biggest secret confident people know. They're not fearless. They're just willing to try, even when fear is still there. So instead of saying, I'm not ready, try saying, I'll learn as I go. Instead of asking, what if I fail? Ask, what if I grow? Because both are possible, but only one leads you forward. Here's a story that perfectly explains this. There was once a pottery class divided into two groups. The first group was told, make as many pots as you can. Quantity is all that matters. The second group was told, make just one perfect pot. At the end of the month, the group that made more pots also made the best ones. Why? Because through mistakes, they learned faster. They improved. They grew. That's what life is like. The more you try, the better you get. Perfection doesn't come from thinking, it comes from doing. So stop waiting for the perfect plan, the perfect time, the perfect you. Start now, with fear, with flaws, with uncertainty. Because the moment you act, you take your power back. You prove to yourself that fear doesn't control you. And over time, something beautiful happens. You start to feel free, free from perfection, free from hesitation, free from the heavy pressure of always being right. You realize that growth is not about being fearless, it's about being real. You stop asking, how can I avoid mistakes? And start asking, how can I learn from them? That's how you turn fear into fuel. That's how you build resilience, courage, and mastery. Because every mistake gives you information, and every small act of courage adds another layer to your confidence. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the thing you used to fear the most has become your biggest teacher. So when you feel fear rising, don't fight it. Don't run from it. Thank it. Because it's showing you the direction of your growth. Fear is the compass that points you toward your next level. Follow it, and you'll always find the lesson you were meant to learn. Part 5. From Mistakes to Mastery. There's a moment in every learner's journey when they finally understand something powerful, that mistakes aren't signs of weakness, they're signs of progress. It's the moment when you stop asking, how can I avoid mistakes? And start asking, how can I learn from them faster? That moment marks the birth of mastery, because mastery isn't about never falling. It's about getting up quicker, learning deeper, and moving smarter each time you do. Think of any person who became great at something: a musician, an athlete, a leader, a creator, even a fluent English speaker. None of them became excellent because they avoided mistakes. They became excellent because they used them. They took every failure as data, every wrong note, every missed shot, every awkward sentence became part of their growth system. That's what separates amateurs from masters. Amateurs hide their mistakes, while masters study them. Amateurs fear judgment, while masters fear stagnation. One tries to look good, the other tries to get better. And that difference changes everything. When you start viewing mistakes this way, life becomes lighter. You stop treating every failure like a personal defeat and start seeing it as an essential part of your story. Because the truth is, the best lessons in life aren't taught in classrooms. They're learned through experience, trial, and error. Real growth is never perfect. It's messy. It's full of wrong turns and restarts. But every one of those wrong turns brings you closer to becoming who you're meant to be. You'll notice something beautiful happens when you embrace mistakes. Your fear slowly fades. Not because fear disappears, but because you stop believing its lies. You realize that mistakes don't destroy you, they develop you. They don't take away from your worth, they reveal your strength. When you make peace with your mistakes, you make peace with yourself. That's when true confidence begins. Not the fake confidence of pretending you're perfect, but the real confidence of knowing you can handle imperfection. You no longer have to hide your errors because you know they're part of the process. You no longer fear being judged because you're too busy growing. And that freedom, that ability to keep learning without fear, is one of the most powerful feelings in the world. Here's something I want you to remember. The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to improve, to keep becoming, to stay curious, because learning never ends. There will always be something new to get wrong, and then get right. That's how life keeps teaching you. Mistakes make you humble. They remind you that you're human, that growth is a journey, not a race. And ironically, once you stop chasing perfection, your progress becomes faster. When you're no longer afraid to make mistakes, you practice more freely. You experiment. You try new approaches. You take more risks. And every one of those risks expands your ability. That's the paradox of growth. When you stop fearing mistakes, you begin to master the very thing you once struggled with. So, instead of aiming to be flawless, aim to be fearless. Instead of trying to be perfect, try to be consistent. Because consistency, not perfection, builds excellence. You don't learn by waiting for the perfect moment. You learn by moving, adjusting, and improving, one mistake at a time. And here's something beautiful about this truth. It doesn't just apply to learning skills or languages, it applies to life itself. In relationships, careers, dreams, mistakes will happen. You'll say the wrong thing. You'll make the wrong choice. You'll misjudge a situation. But those moments are invitations, invitations to reflect, to evolve, to understand yourself more deeply. Mistakes shape your wisdom. They build empathy, patience, and resilience. They help you understand others because once you've been wrong, you stop expecting everyone else to be right all the time. They make you softer, but stronger, humbler, but wiser, slower, but deeper. And that's what true mastery looks like. not a perfect person, but a progressing one. So from now on, I want you to see every mistake as a message from your future self. It's saying, keep going. You're on the right path. You just discovered another way to improve. When you change your relationship with mistakes, everything else changes with it. You start taking action faster. You stop judging yourself harshly. You begin to enjoy learning again because it feels like freedom, not pressure. And little by little, without even realizing it, you grow into someone unstoppable, not because you never fall, but because you always rise. So if you've been afraid to make mistakes in learning English, in your career, in your dreams, remember this: every mistake carries a lesson. Every failure hides a seed of success. Every setback is training for your comeback. You don't need to avoid mistakes. You just need to use them. Because in the end, it's not your fear that defines you. It's what you do after the fear. The courage to continue, to adapt, to learn again. And that's how you turn fear into wisdom. That's how you turn mistakes into mastery. That's how you stop surviving life and start living it fully. So here's your final challenge. This week, make one mistake on purpose. Try something new. Say a word you're unsure about. Start a project you've been afraid to begin. Ask a question you've been too shy to ask. Don't aim to be perfect. Aim to grow. Because once you stop fearing mistakes, you'll discover the real meaning of success. So my students, now you know the truth. Your mistakes don't define you. They refine you. They don't make you weaker. They make you wiser. The only real mistake is being too afraid to try. So from now on, when fear tells you, don't speak, you'll get it wrong, I want you to smile and say, that's exactly how I'll learn. Because every time you make a mistake, you move one step closer to mastery. The best learners are not the perfect ones. They're the brave ones, the ones who try, fail, learn, and keep going. So keep trying, keep speaking, keep learning, even when it's messy, even when it's hard. Because your mistakes are not holding you back. They're pushing you forward. And if this episode touched something inside you, make sure you listen till the end again and share it with someone who's been afraid to start. Thank you for listening to Flexlish English, where every lesson helps you grow in English and in life. And remember, the end of your fear is always the beginning of your freedom. Stay brave and keep flexing your English.